there is so much out there that is really frustrating to watch in terms of the reaction to the Big 12 being involved with private equity and being involved with Allstate and potentially selling off the naming rights to the conference. And I mean, look, it ranges from the jokes to the way over the top, too serious opinions. I'm going to give you a couple of those here to look at just to start off. But in essence, it all boils down to like the Big 12 was forced into this position by the SEC and the Big 10 by their greed. And now the Big 12 has to take a lot of the shots from everybody. And I don't love that. I don't love that fact at all. Let me share my screen with you here. Now, as I said, it ranges from the funny, which is, I got a shout out to Simple Five podcast, the Big 12 looking at giving private equity a massive stake, ruining every other industry it's touched. And of course, we have the Tobias reference there from Arrested Development. Fantastic show. But it might work for us. Where, the first part of that, he's saying, it doesn't work for anybody else, but it might work for us. That's the Big 12 looking at private equity. That's funny. I can at least appreciate that. But it is people cracking jokes, right, at the expense of the Big 12. Then there's the more, I would say, problematic version of this. Like everything else private equity touches, the Big 12 will be destroyed by its own greed. I mean, this is the one that really gets me. The Big 12 will be destroyed by its own greed. Dude, come on. Oh, it's greed that will have destroyed college football at the end of this, or the Big 12 at the end of this. But it is not the greed of that conference. It is not the greed of the Big 12. It is the greed of a couple of parties, the Big 10, the SEC, and Fox and ESPN. It is their greed that will have killed all of this because they have painted the Big 12 in the position to need to go the private equity route to remain even relatively competitive, right? That is the reality, and it's frustrating that not everybody will acknowledge that. But I think you have to remember here, the reason you get some of that from Big 10, SEC, other college football fans, maybe just more your casual college football fans, is because this is more jarring to them. They have not been forced into a position where they have to consider things like this. They have not had to sit and contemplate their actual mortality as a college football program since 2021, like Big 12 fans have. I think Big 12 fans are just so much more conditioned already to dude, tradition's been thrown out the window years ago. Why would we believe in anything being sacred or any tradition or team or conference being sacred because it's for the greater good of the sport or the greater good of the game? We know that's not how it works. This has been completely controlled by greed for years and years. And it manifested itself in the worst ways over the last 3 to 4 years, where we've now lost the Pac-12 and we have two conferences barreling toward just being some sort of super league and completely leaving everybody behind. So if you're a Big 12 fan, you took all the jokes in 2021. You took the Stuart Mandel articles saying that your TV value was only going to be worth like $7 or $8 million per school per year. You took all that stuff. You had to fight for your right to even just feel like you belonged at the table in any way, shape, or form. You've been doing that for a long time. You're in a position where it's like, all right, private equity, we got to hold our nose and do that. I mean, fine. We know what the reality of this whole deal is. Naming rights, we got to be the All-State 12 to get an extra $3 million. Whatever. That's what we have to do. We've been on this road. That is what we have to do. If you're a Big 10 or an SEC fan, it's like, hey, I'm aware that this has been going on. I know that we're taking Texas and Oklahoma, and I know that conferences are changing and we do this Power 2 thing. And it seems like greed is pretty crazy in the sport, but who cares? Life's good for me. I'm in the penthouse, I've got the mansion. I know that life is happening outside there, but it's tougher to bother me when I'm on the golden throne in the mansion right now. It just has not been their reality. They're aware of it, but it's not been the reality of the life that they are living. It's something that they read about in the papers. It's not something that they live. Big 12 fans have been living this, man. We have been living this life. So private equity doesn't jar us near as much as it would others. The naming rights do not jar us. The All-State 12 is not as jarring to us because the All-State 12 sounds a hell of a lot better than the Big 12 dead, because that's what you were facing. It sounds a hell of a lot better than the Big 2. You know, I mean, we talk somewhat derisively about the Pac-2 now with Oregon State and Washington State still hanging out there. You could have like the Big 2 or the Big 4, whoever would have been left behind if the Big 12 had exploded and been left for dead. All-State 12 sounds a lot better than that reality. So even back to, you know, if you want to really extrapolate this back out, you think about Big 12 fans and the life Big 12 fans have been living. I mean, it goes back to when they tried to explore expansion candidates and that was 2016, 2015, 2016. It goes back to Dan Beebe and just being such a passive pushover when Nebraska, Missouri, Texas A&M, Colorado left the league once upon a time. Big 12 has been taking these shots forever. It's been pushed around by Texas. That's been the lifestyle. You know that you are not sacred to anybody in this college athletics space, in this college athletics world. So I think that is why you get the line of demarcation on how that was all perceived when it came out late last week, and then what the reaction was on one side versus the other. So you guys know I'm here to always stick up for your perspective and defend like the life Big 12 fans have lived, because I completely understand it, man. I know it. I've been there, and I get it. David, what's going on, David? David says, please become the Dr. Pepper conference so we can all be a Pepper too. Well, Dr. Pepper, didn't I see that Dr. Pepper is now taken over as the number 2 soda in America? They have surpassed Pepsi. Maybe that's a good omen, David. Maybe that's a good omen. If that means now that the Big 12 is on a trajectory to overtake the Big 10 as the number 2 conference, sign me up. Get me involved with Dr. Pepper. That sounds like a match made in heaven for Brett Yormark in the Big 12. So also, Dr. Pepper just gives me plenty of nostalgia. You know, Dr. Pepper Big 12 championship game. K-State fans online, I know forever, have just called that Big 12 championship game the Dr. Pepper in a fond way. It's a fond moniker being attached to that. So I'm all about Dr. Pepper. Used to drink a ton of Diet Dr. Pepper, not as much anymore these days, but got much love for Dr. Pepper. So David, much love for you as well. Thank you for supporting the channel tonight. And thank you to Nate. Appreciate you, Nate, for popping in here at buzzer beater time. Just a couple of minutes left in the show. Nate says, think CVC wants long-term commitment. CVC being the Luxembourg-based private equity company. Because of previous relationship with Yormark, they know how he feels about basketball. What if he leaves to take over for Adam Silver after 2030? All right. I mean, that's exactly the type of thing that I'm talking about here. I don't know how high Brett Yormark's could climb, like how high his star, how bright his star could get in all of this, and to what job that would lead to. But I wouldn't put much of a ceiling on that guy. I mean, it's a crazy resume. Like, he oversaw an unbelievable period of growth for NASCAR. He took the Nets from New Jersey to Brooklyn, and say what you will about what they've done on the court. That made them a much bigger deal in terms of brand value, which is what we're talking about here, right? Then he was working with Jay-Z, and now he has helped the Big 12, this lowly, forgotten conference that's always been in its own way, actually survive and throw a few punches. He's got a pretty crazy resume across the board. And yes, basketball is something that he definitely fancies himself to be great with. That's something. That's something to have on the radar. Look, I have no idea. I have no idea how the NBA would go about who they would be hiring there. And if that's realistic, none. I think that's the type of thing you would have to be thinking about there when we're saying there's a risk that Yormark or one of these athletic directors or many of these athletic directors or presidents could be leaving. With Yormark, it's thinking about jobs like that. What jobs like that could open that would be like, dude, if you got pursued for that, like, you're going to stick around and not be the commissioner of the NBA to be the commissioner of the Big 12. I mean, that'd be the type of thing I feel like you'd have to take. And so you are running some of that risk. I do agree with you, Nate. I think you're right. Like, reading the tea leaves, especially from that article saying CBC was asking about potentially like, hey, can you guys give us assurances beyond 2031 you'll be together as a conference? Does sound like they're viewing this as a very long-term thing. So Matt Brown had raised the point about, what if they want a 5-year ROI here and they're pushing more and more for that? I'm with you. It seems like it's going to be a longer term type of deal there.